Now, let's get through the battle of Khandaq, sorry. Now, you can read the notes here, but I'll quickly give you the outline. So after the Muslims, apparently their morale was weak according to the kuffar, and they said, now is our chance to attack. So they mustered an army close to 10,000 maybe, Mazbut, in the notes, close to 10,000 soldiers, and they were marching on Medina. Now the Prophet didn't have 10,000 soldiers, and Medina is not fortified, and it doesn't have walls, you can just cross straight into it. So the Prophet gathered his companions. Of course the Prophet knows what to do, and Allah could reveal revelation to him, but he wanted the companions to think, and I'm not going to be here forever. I want you to think according to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to your human, ingenuity. And let's be thinkers, give ideas, you have battle strategies, let's hear them. They came up with nothing good. A man called Salman al-Farisi. Have we all heard of Salman al-Farisi? Salman the Persian. He came from Iran and he accepted Islam, and he was very close to Rasulullah. He said in Persia, because Persia was very experienced in warfare. Remember, they had the Persian Empire. He said, let's dig a massive trench. Do you all know what a trench is? Yeah. He said, let's dig a massive trench around the parts of Medina that are easy to access, that is not surrounded by mountains. We'll make it deep enough and wide enough that their horses cannot cross over. So that when they reach Medina, they're going to be stuck. They cannot attack us with their full numbers. And that's exactly what they did. They started digging the trench, and there's just it's a story, it's a side note, it's recorded in history, that Salman al-Farisi alayhi salam was very, very powerful. And he was digging the worth of 10 men. So the Muhajirin and the Ansar came along, because he was neither a Muhajir nor an Ansar. He came from outside Arabia completely. So the Muhajirin said, Salman minna, he's a Muhajir, he's one of us. And the Ansar said, no, Salman is one of us, he is an Ansar. And they started to argue with one another. Each one of them wanted Salman al-Farisi to be in their group. So Rasulullah comes along. He said, Salman is not a Muhajir, nor is he an Ansar. He said, Salman minna Ahlul Bayt. He said, Salman is one of the Ahlul Bayt. That's the position of Salman alayhi salam to the Prophet and to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. That Rasulullah brought him under the cloak of Ahlul Bayt. Alayhim salam Allah. So just remember that he's very important, and you should look up the story of Salman. Of course you don't have to read his whole entire biography, but he is a man that you should definitely read upon, because he was one of the staunch supporters of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi.
Some say Salman lived at the Prophet Isa time.
Apparently Salman lived for 500 years.
500.
And there's strong historical narrations to support it. Usually I'm against things like that, but there is something very strong to support it. If you read in the books of history, it's widely mentioned. So the Meccans finally reached and they found the trench. And they called upon a warrior to join their Meccan army, the Kuffar. What was his name? Amr ibn Abd al-Widd al-Amiri. He apparently was equal to 1,000 warriors. He found a small gap in the trench, something that his horse and a few other people could jump over. So he jumped over the trench, and the Muslim army saw Amr ibn Abd al-Widd al-Amiri, and he was infamous for his strength and his martial skills with the sword. And remember, like I said, it was customary for the Arabs to challenge each other in single combat for glory before the battle starts. So he challenged. He stood on his own with a couple of men before 5,000 Muslims. And he said, which of you will fight me in combat? He says, which of you wants to go to heaven? Rasulullah said, he says, who will fight? And I will guarantee for him heaven. Who took up the call? Imam Ali. See that? Everything is Imam Ali. Subhanallah, see that? I don't even have to tell you the history yet, and you just know it was Imam Ali. Your love for Imam Ali comes from all the years of drinking matti and eating burqa. Subhanallah. It's that your pure bread always. So of course, Rasulullah first told Ali, no, let someone else have a chance. 3 times he issued the call. No one but Imam Ali alayhi salam entered the battlefield. And what did Rasulullah say in that instance? He says, بَرَزَ الْإِيمَانُ كُلُّ وَذَهَبَ الْإِيمَانُ كُلُّ إِلَى الشِّرْكِ كُلِّهِ. He says all of faith has now went up against, or has gone up against all of kufr, all of polytheism. Rasulullah here said, he says, the entirety of al-Iman is in Ali bin Abi Talib right now. And of course, Imam Ali alayhi salam chopped Amr ibn Abd al-Amiri down in seconds. In half it is narrated. And do you know what Rasulullah said about that strike? He says the strike of Ali on the day of Al-Khandaq is better than the worshipping of the humans and the jinn from the beginning of time until the day of judgment. That one strike. What do we say in Surah Al-Mulk? أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. The best of you in deeds. Imam Ali was so sincere towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he had no fear because he was ready to meet his Lord. He was ready to give his life in every instance. That one strike is better than the worshipping of all of creation. And this is narrated from Rasulullah. So, the people that were with Amr ibn Abd al-Amiri here jumped back over the trench and legged it. So what happened here? You see an ayah in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before the Quraysh army couldn't traverse the trench, but they besieged the Muslims for 27 days, is being stated, or close to a month, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent strong, you know what I remember in the desert, if they have strong winds, it ends up being a sandstorm. He sent a sandstorm covering the kuffar until they couldn't bear it anymore, and they packed up and left Medina completely, granting the Muslims a total victory with only a slight, there were small skirmishes here and there, but the bulk of the army could not reach the trench. So Allah in the end almost wiped out the army and sent them back to Medina through a sandstorm. So this was the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming to aid the Prophet of Islam. Remember this, I think there's an ayah about it, inshallah we'll find that and we'll post it. Now, while this was happening, pay attention to this, this is very important. While this was happening, a Jewish tribe that was allies with the Prophet in Medina betrayed him. And they wanted to attack the Prophet from the rear, inside Medina. But when they saw that the kuffar were defeated by the sandstorm, they pulled back. But Rasulullah knows, and they were about to attack them. And they broke their treaty. This is going to be very controversial. Pay very close attention to this. It will be used against you one day. The tribe's name was Bani Qurayza, or Bani Qurayza. They betrayed the alliance that the Prophet had made, and they ended up, pay attention, they all ended up, the generals and the leaders of this army, Rasulullah beheaded them and took their women and children as slaves, as captives. Do we accept that? It's hard, it happened. It actually did happen. Bani Qurayza were put to the sword by the Prophet. Now that sounds like terrorism. That sounds like, wow, they have one on us. But let's read exactly what happened. What happened was this. Rasulullah came to judge between them. And Rasulullah had the intention of what? Forgiving, but not forgetting. Forgiving and removing them from Medina. And to exile them. But they didn't accept. They said, we do not accept that you rule over us. And they wanted, I think it was Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. Sa'ad ibn Ubadah or Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. One of the two. I'll check the history. It might be written here. They said, we want him to rule over us. We do not want you to. We do not accept your authority. And okay, you're the ruler of Medina, but we don't accept you as the Prophet. We want Sa'ad, a man called Sa'ad, to rule over us and him to give us the judgment. And we want it according to the Torah. They were being sneaky. And this man knew the Torah very well. And do you know what the ruling for treason is in the Torah? The death penalty. So it wasn't Rasulullah that gave them the order. He said, are you sure that's what you want? He says, and if it happens, we will stick to it. They said, we will stick to it. So the man went through the Torah, and he saw that treason and going back on your allegiance and betrayal and backstabbing is the death penalty in Judaism. And I will find you the verse in the Old Testament that treason is punishable by death. So it was not Rasulullah who carried out the order. They implemented the order upon themselves. They tried to trick the Prophet, but they ended up tricking themselves. So he did exactly what they asked of him. He put their men to death, the leaders of the army, and he enslaved their women exactly as it was written in the Torah. So don't let anybody use it against you. The Prophet wanted just to simply exile them to another Jewish community. So remember this story, and if you keep reading after the Battle of Al-Khandaq, the Battle of the Trench, in the history book that I post up nearly every week, you will see that it is mentioned in there. Now, just for your reference, there are 3 tribes in Medina that were giving the Prophet trouble. They were called Bani Qurayza, Bani Qaynuqa, and Bani al-Nadir. And these were the ones that he fought in the Battle of Khaybar that inshallah we will get to in time. And we'll leave it there. But before we stop, I'll ask you a few questions. And I want you to read the notes and we'll examine you on them next week.